I start. Good morning. Nice to be here. I thought it would be good to have a common understanding about what do we understand by competence, by competences. The word is buzzing around in the last years everywhere in Europe, in a lot of countries. A lot of countries have also problems to translate it to their own language. I don't know how that's here. Do you have a word for competence, or do you just make it Estonian competentie or something like that? Is there a word for competence? Okay. The competence of a presenter. What is a competent presenter? And like Uli already said, we always take at least three components, three elements which are in a competence. So a good presenter, let's take a competent presenter should have skills, should have knowledge, and should have attitude. Skills, knowledge, and attitude. And a good presenter should have prepared himself very well where the markers are. Yes. So, if you want to be, let's take two examples. When you want to be a competent saxophone player, you need the skills. You need to practice. You need to be able to hold the instrument, to push the buttons, to blow it in the right way. You need to practice that a lot. So you need the skills for that. You need also knowledge. You need knowledge about chords in music, what note you can play and what can play at what moment. So you need a theory about music theory. But you also need to know a lot about the instrument, about that they have a mouthpiece where there is this reed in, this wooden thing, and you need to, sometimes you have to replace that, and you need to know how to do that all, and you need to know how to clean the instrument every time after you've played, so there's a lot of things you have to know. But then, if you are very well in playing it, and you know everything, but when you are on stage, you don't have at all the attitude to communicate, you're just standing there a little bit and doing your thing, then you're not competent. So you also need the competence to communicate your music to the audience. So it needs the three sets of things: skills, knowledge, and attitude. So if I take the other example, if you want to be a good presenter, then you need skills, so you can practice in front of the mirror, and you can practice your voice and to speak in a clear way. You can have some knowledge how to make a good flip chart. Well, I'm not the best example on that, but how to write clear, how to make a good PowerPoint presentation. There's a lot of knowledge about that, and how to build up a presentation. And of course, you need the attitude to do that in a way that people like what you do, that you have the kind of attitude that you want people to understand, that you feel confident, I guess. You see that this attitude is maybe always the most difficult one, and I think relates a little bit to, because this you can practice, and you can even you can practice skills, and you can read a lot, you can have a lot of knowledge, and then you can say, well, now I can do it like this, or I can do it like this. I have a certain level of my skills, or I have a certain level of my knowledge. When it comes to attitude, that's a bit more difficult. How to describe a right attitude, or how can you measure an attitude? Like I said, these are the basic things: skills, knowledge, and attitude. Then there are a lot of discussions about there should be also something fourth, maybe about motivation, or about passion, or about vision. So This is the very basic understanding of a competence. So a competence means, in a way, if somebody is competent, if you want to check competency, it's about the level, to what level somebody is able to do a certain task. In a way, it's about that. How competent is somebody to do a certain task? And you can measure that. It's an important issue, and this competence of trainers. In the youth field, you see these discussions happening a lot, not only here, but also in other countries and on the European level. And why is there this need? I think it has partly to do with that being a trainer is a kind of unclear job. I think there are a lot of people who call themselves a trainer and do very different things. So there is a kind of need to define the job. There's a kind of need to say, well, that job, trainer means this, 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 and this. I think that's one of the reasons that we talk about competences. Because it's often unclear, I think we ourselves as trainers have a need to look at ourselves, and because we ask ourselves the question, are we good trainers? What does it mean that we are good trainers? How can we check that? How can we assess ourselves on being a trainer? Because if you want to know, if you want to make step forwards, if you want to be a better trainer, if you want to assess yourself, you need, of course, a few criteria. You need, well, a competence model can help a lot in when you define the job. You can also see for yourself, yeah, I'm at that level, or I want to improve there, or whatever. It helps you for your further development as a trainer. I think next to that, it also has to do with the need of quality development in youth work. So if we want to have a better quality of youth work, we also need more to define what are good trainers who can train youth workers and who can train young people. Maybe it's also a way which is linked to being able to assess yourself, to promote yourself. So if there is more a common understanding about what a trainer is, maybe it helps you also to promote yourself as a trainer. To put yourself on your website or whatever you have, to say, well, I'm able to do this, 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 and this. And of course, there might be also the need of others, people who want to employ you, who want to check if you're good or not. So on the side of, could be national agencies or could be other institutions who want a certain framework, if they want to have a trainer, that they have a list, so that they can check you if you fit into that list or not. Now, like I said, there's a lot going on trying to define trainer competences, but maybe it's not that difficult to do that. So maybe you should just jump into that. So I want to invite you to do that and to go into groups of 5, 6, just make small groups, 5, 6 people, and to agree on what you think as a group are the 3 most important competences of a trainer. The 3 most important. And then please relate to this as your reference for competence. Try to agree on 3. Let's see this ship now as a trainer. So I want to invite you to come up with the 3 you have and to put them group by group, to put them here. Maybe it needs some clarification, or maybe it's clear. So, which group can I invite to put up the 3 most important competences? I see a lot of things which have to do with attitude. There's a lot of things that go with, well, being open-minded, self-awareness again, the whole thing about love, willingness to give, dignity. It's a lot about a certain attitude that you see as important for trainers. I think that is a lot there, and I can imagine. I mean, I think that is an important competence, and at the same time, I also am aware that it's one of the most difficult ones, because when it comes to self-awareness, when it comes to open-mindedness, people can be that in very different ways. It's not, it is so much in, I don't know if that now was, the self-awareness. I think one of the most important, I don't know if you can call it even a competence, but maybe it's even a trick. One of the most important things for trainers is to be themselves. You cannot, sometimes in training of trainers, then there are participants who try to imitate. They think, well, they take one of the team of the trainers and they think, well, that's how I also want to be, and they try to imitate another trainer. It doesn't work. You only can be yourself. And of course that needs self-awareness, and it also needs self-confidence. But that's something which is, if you talk about competence and you talk about learning and to learn how to be yourself is a very, well, it's a very personal process. That's the thing about being a trainer. The most important tool that you have is you yourself. You have to work with who you are. So I can imagine that this self-awareness and self-confidence comes back a lot. And of course that helps to be open-minded also. If you are not self-confident, if you cannot be yourself, it's hard to be open-minded. It's hard to be, because then you're concerned so much about how you do and how you should act and how you should move, and then you're not open-minded. If you are self-confident, you can be that better. Then there are some more, well, sense of humor. We did, because that always comes back when we're talking about competence of trainers, that trainers need a sense of humor. Well, how to measure that? So you are a very good trainer if people are rolling on the floor of laughing all the time, or is that too much? And somebody who doesn't make a joke every 5 minutes, is that still a good trainer? I think it helps, but well, let's put this next to make the connection between what you now did and what is happening now at this moment. On the European level, training courses for training, because there they also try to define competences that should be worked on in a training course. And I have the example of 2 training courses. One is called TAIL, it was 2 years ago, and was a cooperation between the European Commission, the Youth in Action Programme, and the Youth Programme of the Council of Europe. They work together in what they call the partnership, and they decided that they needed a kind of pilot project on training of trainers, which was called TAIL. The other training course I take as an example is the training course I'm involved in myself, and that is the training of trainers, which is in short TOT, T-O-T, and that runs now into the 11th edition, which already goes on for a long time, for 10 years, and which is also training trainers for European use field. And the two of them made a list of competences. In a way, it says that as a trainer, you also have to be aware of what is happening around us. We are not just in education, but we are in an environment, in a political environment, in a social environment, and you should be aware of that. To design, we already had that here. Evaluation is mentioned as a separate one here. To use, which is of course becomes more and more important, to use all kind of information technology. And then we get competence to motivate and empower learners. I think it's clear. To be a self-directed learner. I will come back to that later. To communicate, what you also said. To deal with conflict situations. To work in teams. That's a special. You did not mention that. I don't know if that has to do with the national, because it's on the national level. We did 10 years ago something like that. That was already in. We did a questionnaire for trainers, and that questionnaire was filled in, I think, by 120 European trainers. And what came out is that the biggest challenge for European trainers, anyway, was to work in international teams. That was the most difficult thing for them. Maybe that's also different on national level. I don't know how much you work in teams, because that's also, on the European level, you always work in teams of 2, 3, 4 people. So teamwork is very important there. Raise self-awareness, I'm going a little bit quicker now. Creativity was also mentioned here. And innovation, critical thinking, to act as a resource person, which means that you can help people when they look for resources. Maybe that you don't have all the resources yourself, but you can tell people where to find them. To design educational activities again, but then within the European policy. And the competence to develop an educational approach. So to have an idea, to have a vision, why you are doing what you are doing, that you have a vision about training, about education, about learning. The tail one has 18 competences. The top one is a little bit shorter, there's only 7. The competence to understand and facilitate learning, what you also mentioned. Also there you find the one of working in international teams. To design, implement and evaluate training programs, that's here 1, in the tail one that were 3. To plan educational activities in line with the values of the Use in Action program. If you would translate that to your national level, it would be in the framework of the values of the organization you work for or for the program you work for. The competence to develop and make explicit, that's what I said before about the tail one, that you have a vision on education and that you can work with that and that you can explain it also to participants why you do what you do and how you do that. The competence to deal with ambiguity and change, and the learning to learn competence. The one with ambiguity and change I will come back later to, because I think it's a very important one. The learning to learn one is what was mentioned as self-directed learning in the tail. So, like I already mentioned before, the learning to learn competence is now seen in Europe as a very important competence in the framework of lifelong learning. And in TOT we say for a trainer it's very important that he or she is able to go on with learning, that being a trainer is not something you can at a certain moment say, now I know how to do it and now I can stop learning. You have to go on learning all the time. And it's and it's something you have to organize yourself. So you have to be able to organize your own learning as a trainer. So we think that is a very important competence, to organize your own learning and to keep on learning all the time. So as you see, there is not a huge difference between what you came up with. We thought it would be good for people who do a training course of 1 year to have the possibility to assess themselves all the time, to see where am I now. And when they start the training course, one of the first things we give them is this self-perception inventory, so they can, let's say, they can assess, they can score themselves, where am I? Where am I at this moment? And you can also assess then, and you can also see, where do you want to develop still? Where do you want to, what do I still want to work on to improve as a trainer? We use a lot feedback, but then especially feedback from peers. So in a way, this tool is not so much about scoring. It's a tool to make you help to reflect on yourself and then to check that with others. So people have this, because this training course takes altogether 1 year, and they always have that with them on every seminar. But also there are mentor talks, so when they have a talk with their mentor, when they have a talk with their peers. It's a kind of reference document where you have a lot of points there which you can talk about, which you can reflect on, and where you see, we hope, some improvement during the year, that you make further steps, which is not always the case. It's often funny to see that people score themselves, well, not score, but are very positive about some competencies they think they have, but then when they go deeper into that, then they think, ah, shit, no. So sometimes you also go down because you understand more what a competence is about, and you get more questions. I think that the competence to deal with ambiguity and change is an enormous important one. I think in a way for everybody, I would say everywhere in education, on schools, starting with children already, that should be one of the most important competences in education. I think we are living in a world where things are changing faster and faster and faster, where there are no answers anymore, where there's a lot of uncertainty in a way, where there's a lot of different ways you can look at things, where there's a lot of different opinions, where there's and so it's getting more and more complex. And what you see as a kind of reaction is that a lot of people have this tendency then to go for simpleness. So I think the whole what you see now everywhere maybe in the world, but anyway in Europe, is that more and more those politicians who give very simple answers get the votes, because in a way they are smart, because the world's getting more and more complex, and people tend to go then for small, simple answers, which are no answers. We all know it's crap, these simple answers, because they won't work. But people have the tendency to go for that. And I think it is because we never learned how to deal with all this ambiguity. We come from education systems where still it is like that there's a good and a, well, I'm making it now a little bit extreme, but where it's still about the good and the wrong answer. I think that goes for everybody. We end up more and more in situations where there is no clear solution, where there is no one answer, where there are different answers. Our job is changing all the time. We have to deal with groups where people have very different ways of thinking, where have very different ways of learning, very different ways of reacting. But also the world, our environment changes. The demands from the ones who employers are changing, but then the whole educational world is changing. What we took for granted for years about how people learn is questioned a lot and is doubted a lot. We always thought that people learn step by step by step. We think very linear in how people learn. But when we look really at learning, people don't learn like that. People learn in very different ways and go a little bit forward and a little bit backwards, and then they go in circles. A learning process, but we always learned that a learning process was step by step by step by step. It's bullshit. It doesn't exist. It's not how people learn. Our brains are much more complex and much more beautiful than a straight line. So, what we work in, our environment, is very complex and is changing all the time and doesn't have solutions. So, as one person should know how to deal with ambiguity and change, its trainers, or maybe it's people in education, should be able to deal with that and should be able to help the learners where you work with to develop also that competence. I think if we really want to make a step in education and really want to make a step into education, in training, we should help people to develop that competence, to deal with, but then of course you have to start with yourself. How much can you deal with ambiguity and change? And that is why we had in the training of trainers this since 2 years. We have this as a kind of new competence that we work on. And it's very funny to see how because the problem also to work with that competence is how to explain that competence, how to understand what dealing with, as such, it's very ambiguous to try to understand what is dealing with ambiguity and change. It's a very complex also competence. But I think it's maybe one of the most important ones we have to work on.
If we want to change, we have to reflect first, or we have to notice first our habitual thinking and habitual activities. So if we want to change something inside us or in our world, then we have to study our habits first, and we have to study what have I done before that I'm here right now, and if I want to change something in the future, then I have to change something in my habits right now. And it's also related to learn, because we are so stuck in our beliefs and in our habits that even if we are going to some seminars or some trainings, but if we're not ready to change our views and beliefs, then we're not ready to absorb anything from this training.
I agree, but I'm trying to make immediately the step to what that means for training, because I think the opposite of being ready for change and for learning and for developing is the opposite is fear. I think the reason why we don't want to change, why we also are stuck to simple answers and stay with that, is fear. Because I think in a way human beings are beautiful things because they want to change all the time. It's in us to. Learning is not something strange for us, it's something how we act, how we are. That's why we're different than dogs. If you look to a dog 600 years ago and a dog now, they do exactly the same. They didn't change anything. We, as human beings, we change a lot. We do a lot of things different, and it goes on and on and on. Because we have this ability or even need to improve, to do things better, to do things different. So I think our natural behavior is to be ready for change and to be ready for improving, to do things in a different way. And I think what stops us is often fear. Fear for unknown, or fear, which has to do, of course, a lot with self-confidence and self-awareness. But I think, for me, the consequence to training is how important it is to create an environment where people feel safe and where people can be vulnerable, where people can... I think that's such a big difference. That's the nice thing about doing training courses, which takes a long time, because of course I'm aware of that, then it's easier, that at a certain moment you can get a group, or you don't do that, but you try to facilitate that the group gets into a kind of mode, into a kind of atmosphere where, what is a learning atmosphere? And I think there a lot of safety is needed. So I say that because it's not only a personal thing. You have to be first self-confident and self-aware before you can change. I think it has a lot to do with your environment, and I think we as trainers have a big responsibility to create an environment where people... Because I think one important aspect is that you can be vulnerable, that you can make mistakes. You cannot learn without making mistakes. And mostly we are in groups where it's not allowed to make mistakes, where it's stupid to make mistakes. And I think for us as trainers, it's important to create that kind of environment. Maybe that should even be in the competence list, to create the right environment. That instrument from this self-perception inventory, we also ask people, we give people diaries, and so that they can document their learning. And we advise them more and more to, if you say you're competent in something and you try to describe that, to describe a situation where you really acted that out. Because then it's very difficult to say, I'm competent, but I never tried it out. I never did it. I mean, the only way to check yourself, to test, is to do it. And then to describe what really happened now when I was doing it.